And some breaking news just coming in. India has reacted very strongly to the 2611 mastermind and JUD chief Hafiz Saeed being referred to as Sahib in a United Nations correspondence. Headlines today's access a UN letter dated the 17th of December 2014, where Gary Quinlan, the chairman of the UNSC Sanctions Committee's letter, refers to Saeed as Sahib. The feeling in the Indian establishment is that this missive in fact exposes the United Nations cavalier stance on terror, a stance India is furious with. Sources in the security establishment have told Headlines today that no wonder the United Nations mechanism on terror is not working. For more on this story, joining me live at this point in time is my colleague Gaurav Sawant. Gaurav, the United Nations refers to Hafiz Saeed as Sahib. What is this letter all about, and what is the action that India plans to take now?
India is absolutely furious. The manner in which the United Nations is dealing with a global threat, Lashkar-e-Taiba, the terror that comes from Pakistan-sponsored terrorists, and referring to Hafiz Mohammad Sahib as Hafiz Sahib is completely unacceptable, and it shows that the United Nations is either not aware of the magnitude of the crisis or does not know how to deal with it. And the existing mechanism on counter-terror, that is why it doesn't appear to be working. Now, this is a letter. India has given evidence of Pakistan-based terror group, the Lashkar-e-Taiba, and Hafiz Saeed's involvement in the Herat attack on the Indian consulate.
Right.
With this information, India is saying, what action will the UN take against these organizations and Hafiz Mohammad Sahib in particular to make it effective? He is on the UN sanctions list. He is a designated global terrorist, but none of this appears to be working on Pakistan. Pakistan is taking no action against him. So India is saying, what will the UN do? Now, if the UN and if the chairman of the sanctions committee refers to Hafiz Mohammad Sahib as Hafiz Sahib, what action can anybody expect what pressure can anyone expect on Pakistan to take action against Hafiz Mohammad Sahib? This is what India is extremely furious about, seething with anger, and this clearly indicates that the existing mechanism in the UN is not working.
Well, clearly the existing mechanism within the UN is not working, and that stands exposed by this letter. But Gaurav, what are your sources, within the Indian establishment telling you? Is the Ministry of External Affairs, likely to be taking any action?
Look, the Ministry of External Affairs and, in the United Nations, India will take this up very strongly. But what India is insisting is Lashkar-e-Taiba doesn't pose a threat only to India.
Right.
While India is, faces the brunt of Lashkar-e-Taiba and Hafiz Mohammad Sahib, this terrorist organization poses a challenge to the entire world. David Coleman Headley's trial in that Chicago courthouse clearly proved that Lashkar-e-Taiba is spreading its tentacles even in Europe. They were threatening to target Denmark, blow up a newspaper, cartoonist in Denmark. So this is a global terrorist organization. It has offshoots in England. It has offshoots in several other parts of the world. So the world needs to come together and put pressure on Pakistan to deal with Lashkar-e-Taiba and put Hafiz Mohammad Saeed behind bars. Clearly, that doesn't seem to be happening.
And clearly, Gaurav, at this point in time, if you just could take us through the contents of this particular letter, it does, in a sense, indicate the UN's attitude on terror.
It indeed does, Rishika. If you look at this letter, when is this written? It's the 17th of December 2014. That is just 4 days ago. That is the time when you've had one of the worst terror attacks in Peshawar.
Right.
You've had a series of other terror attacks that are taking place, in this region. This is the time that Lashkar-e-Taiba, India is putting pressure that Lashkar-e-Taiba action needs to be taken against them. And at this time, the chairman of the United Nations Security Council Committee, which specifically deals with Al-Qaeda and associated individuals, is talking about Hafiz Mohammad Sahib as Hafiz Mohammad Sahib. And this is indicative of, either that chalta hai attitude or, the lack of seriousness with which the UN is dealing with this issue.
Well, clearly, Gaurav, it does point to the lack of seriousness. It does, in a certain sense, expose, the UN's attitude on terror. And as, in fact, sources have been telling Headlines today, the UN mechanism on terror is not working. And perhaps lapses like this only stand to expose that. Gaurav, if you could just put these developments in the light of, the last 1 week, we've seen, a terror surge in Sydney, followed by one of the worst terror attacks in the subcontinent, which killed 132 children in the school in Peshawar. So in the light of, the heightened focus on terror threats in the subcontinent, how does this letter then, what does this letter actually do?
This letter, Rishika, is actually a wake-up call. This letter is now a wake-up call for the world to come together to deal with terror with the seriousness it deserves. The issue, as some of my sources were pointing out, is the United Nations is being too politically correct.
Right.
They don't want to anger anyone. They don't want to hurt anyone. And, they have such a chalta hai attitude, such a bureaucratic attitude in dealing with the situation that no one is taking hard action. No one is even contemplating hard action. And they're not even calling a spade a spade. And this is not how the world can come together to fight terror. Now, let's take the example of Pakistan.
Right.
More than 132 children are killed. They launch a series of airstrikes against Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. Pakistan Army chief goes to Afghanistan. He takes, he takes the Afghan government into confidence.
Right.
He talks about how Afghanistan and Pakistan need to combat this together. Now, can we expect Pakistan to do the same on India-centric terror? That is not happening. Pakistan is encouraging India-centric terror. When India goes to an organization like UN, and when did this Herat, the Indian consulate was attacked in Herat, there is evidence Pakistan was involved in it.
Right.
If you recall, that's the time that the Narendra Modi government was being sworn in. I had that time interviewed then Afghanistan President Hamid Karzai, who clearly told me, then President Hamid Karzai told me there is evidence of Lashkar-e-Taiba's involvement. Pakistan-based terrorists coming to Afghanistan and carrying out this attack, and yet no action is being taken, and that is the point India is raising at the UN.
Well, absolutely. India is raising a very pertinent point with the United Nations with substantiated evidence against Hafiz Saeed, and the response that we in fact have got from the United Nations Security Council is that a letter from the United Nations Security Council Committee refers to Hafiz Saeed as Sahib. Headlines Today is in possession of that letter dated 17th December 2014, clearly indicative of the United Nations attitude on terror. Strategic Affairs Editor Gaurav Sawant, thanks so much for joining us with that update this morning. We're going to continue to track development and get reactions on this big developing story.